I'm back again, and I have some subjects that I really want to talk about. But if you have a thing that you are really curious about, if you have something like, I know Dutch people for this and why are they doing this, please put it in the comments. I would love to actually explore things that you find interesting. But for today, I'm going to talk about something that might be controversial. Grootneerlandisme is a weird topic, but very interesting, because I haven't heard people talk about this in forever. I think maybe one time during history lessons, but it never came up. And it's kind of a special thing because, there's this part in Belgium that speaks Dutch. It's called Flanders. And historically speaking, when William of Orange united all the Low Countries, Belgium and Luxembourg were the Netherlands. It was part of the Netherlands, but now they're separate countries. But there's this group of people who nowadays believe that the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium needs to be part of the Netherlands. And it's called Grootneerlandisme. They usually call the country that they want to make Greater Netherlands, Groot Nederland, or Duitsland, which is remarkably similar to Deutschland, which is Germany. So the idea of reunifying the Dutch-speaking parts in Europe has been around for over a century, but it became a solid thing in literature from the 1920s, so it's almost a century old, this idea. There's another variation of this, it's called Heel Nederland, which basically means that they want to reunite Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands as one big country again. But unlike the Greater Netherlands or Grootneerlandisme, this would mean there will be multiple languages in one country. One of the main champions for the idea of Grootneerlandisme was the social democratic historian Pieter Gijl. And Pieter Gijl wrote the book Grootneerlandisme. He basically laid the foundation for this motion, and before the Second World War he was really adamant to make this happen. He believed that the reunification of the Dutch language areas would suit the Dutch national character. And there are a lot of similarities between Flanders and the Netherlands, I'm not gonna lie. There are similarities in voting behavior, there are linguistic similarities because the standard Dutch for Flemish and the standard Dutch for Netherlands Dutch is very, very similar. There are a lot of economic agreements between Flanders and the Netherlands. There are also mergers between companies between the Netherlands and Belgium. There are also a lot of similarities between cultural and educational areas. And in the media, especially television, there are also a lot of collaborations between Dutch and Flemish television. So the Greater Netherlands movement started at the end of the 19th century. This has mainly to do with the wars going on, with the fact that in Belgium the French-speaking people were higher in rank, were usually looking down on the Dutch-speaking people. And especially the Dutch-speaking bourgeoisie revolted against this idea. And the desire to restore the broken bond between the Dutch-speaking Flemish people and the Dutch-speaking Dutch people led to het Algemeen Nederlands Verbond. Then the First World War started, which basically sharpened the divide between the French-speaking people in Belgium and the Dutch-speaking people. This divide was further fueled by the stories that a lot of Dutch-speaking soldiers could not understand the French-speaking higher officers, mainly leading to miscommunications, and a lot of Dutch soldiers saw their end. They basically killed themselves because of misinterpretation, or because they just ran into battle because they didn't know what to do. And so the negative attitude of the French-speaking soldiers towards the Dutch-speaking soldiers basically led to the entire idea that Flanders was better off just seceding from Wallonia, from Belgium, and going back to the Netherlands. But the idea has a lot of similarities with fascism as well. It was associated with fascism during the war period. After all, they wanted to reunify nations with the same language, and there was this pride with language and cultural similarities between Dutch and Flanders people. So when during the Second World War Germany occupied both the Netherlands and Belgium, some people actually had hope that the Nazis would support the Groot-Nederlands idea. But as you might think, the Nazis didn't want to hear about that. They want to have a greater Germanic empire. Basically everyone had to speak German, and Dutch or French or whatever language has to be dissolved at the go. So over time het Grootneerlandisme was basically banned by the Nazis, which resulted by everyone who wanted Grootneerlandisme to revolt. But after the war there was not much room for nuances. So if you were in favor of Grootneerlandisme, you were seen as a fascist, and you didn't want to be that. So a lot of people came off of the idea of Grootneerlandisme. It only came back into favor decades after the war, and I think the last time I've heard about it in the news was in 2008, when Dutch politician Geert Wilders was very much in favor of this. I don't know if you know who Geert Wilders is. I'm gonna leave myself out of the political issues and say he's a politician, but he has some very radical ideas. So on May 2008, Geert Wilders proposed to hold a referendum both in the Netherlands and in Belgium to see how many people would support the idea of reunifying Belgium with the Netherlands, or at least the Flanders region with the Netherlands. From the Belgian angle, a lot of politicians were like, well, thank you for the welcoming gesture, but we rather want to stay or independent or part of Belgium, and a lot of people were also thinking that he was a bit of a madman and thinking things too positively in order to create a successful merger between these countries. But surprisingly, an interview in 2007 held under Dutch participants, 85% of the Dutch people saw something in at least intensifying the bond between Flanders and the Netherlands, and 77% wanted to have a reunification between Flanders and the Netherlands. I have no statistics from the Belgian side, by the way, so I don't know how it was there. But even if this would happen, a lot of the times and in the main theories, Brussels is not part of this reunification. Brussels is mainly French speaking, and it would mean that it's basically an enclave in the Greater Netherlands, or it will be like a micronation. And one last thing, Grootneerlandisme basically means all the Dutch-speaking countries in Europe. Countries like South Africa, Suriname, and all those Dutch-speaking countries are not taken into account in this respect. It was taken into account at the start of this idea, but at that time those countries were still colonies, so yeah, it's a bit of a weird idea. So this topic might be controversial for some people, especially if you live near the border between the Netherlands and Belgium, but I have not heard people from other parts of the Netherlands talk about this. It's not really in the news right now, but what would you choose? Would you think, oh yeah, let's reunify the Dutch-speaking parts of Europe? Or would you be like, no, let them be a separate country? But whatever you choose, see you next time. I was wondering what was that? It's cannot on the chat. The most difficult topic I had in a while. And I almost fell. Jesus. Grootneerlandisme. There it was. Can you stay focused on me, please, camera? I know you want to watch the beautiful scenery behind me, but can you focus on me?